Perfect. Okay, so hi everybody. Welcome to part two of our accommodations off to college session. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We're joined by Lee Fickling from Children with Diabetes, and we're super excited to answer some of your last minute questions about all things accommodations and disability services and res life. And just it's August now, so really starting to think about going off to college and accommodations and move-in day, and everything is just right around the corner. So a little bit nerve-wracking, but hopefully we will help you feel a little bit better and supported about everything that is going on. So Lee is the Chief Operating Officer for Children with Diabetes. She is a subject matter expert in all things diabetes in the classroom, workplace, and beyond. So you are in great hands with her. And her daughter, Ava, was also diagnosed with type 1 in 2013 at the age of 3. So she has experience as a caregiver to someone with diabetes as well. Um, and yeah, Lee, if you want to take it away.
Okay, sounds great. Hey, everybody, I'm Lee Fickling. Like they said, I'm so happy that you all are with us here tonight. It's going to be really informal in terms of the content that we're going to be able to share. I'm glad that we're here to be able to sort of talk about college accommodations and getting ready to go off to college with diabetes. Instead of wearing my CWD polo tonight, my traditional CWD uniform, I'm wearing a shirt. We just got back from our Friends for Life conference in Orlando. And one of our colleagues there, they make these T-shirts, and they have different things that they say on it. And so my T-shirt says, I'm wearing blue for my daughter, and it talks about type 1 diabetes awareness. And today is my daughter's 15th birthday. And so I felt like that this was appropriate for me to be able to wear since she's turning 15 today. So it's sort of her birthday and the day that I birthed her. So it's a big day for us in our house, but soon it's going to be a big day for you all as you get ready to send your kids off to college. As we talked about before, my background is in higher ed administration. I've served as a dean of students in 2 different higher education institutions, and I've worked in higher education administration in executive leadership roles probably for the last 27 years. So I've worked in academic advising. I've worked in residence life. I've worked in student affairs administration. I've worked in testing, tutoring, sort of everything involving sort of student affairs, student success, everything involving sending your students off to college and helping them have that successful student experience once they get to college. So what I want to do today is really help arm you with the skills that you need as a parent and your kids need once they get to school to really have that successful college experience from day one once they get there. Um, I've got an outline of things that I'm going to share with you. I don't have a slide deck because I really do want this to be informal. I want you to be able to use the chat box here on the Zoom with us here tonight, for you to be able to chat in information, ask questions of me. Whenever I talk about different topics, if you have specific questions about those topics, feel free to be able to drop questions in that chat box. We'll have time at the end of this session also to be able to go back and cover things as well. If you have questions specifically about other things or you think about things sort of along the way that you wish that you would have asked earlier in the session that you want to be able to follow up on later on before the session ends. But the first thing that I want to be able to let you know is that it's really important, if you have not already done this, if your kids are getting ready to go off to school this fall, for you to register with the Disability Services Office at your institution. So whether they are going to a community college, whether they are going to a private school, a 4-year institution, a state school, it is super important for you to be able to register with the Disability Services Office. That could be considered. They could be called the Disability Resource Center, the Disability Services Office. There's different names, the Accessibility Services Office, at the school where you're getting ready to go to. We talked about this in part 1 of this webinar series, that diabetes is a disability under the ADA. That's not my definition of disability under the ADA. That comes from the ADA of 1990 as amended in 2008. The reason that diabetes is a disability under the ADA is that it is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. When we think about diabetes with our kids, the major life activity is the function of the endocrine system. So because their pancreas is not working when compared to the average person in the general population, so my daughter is a twin. The twin does not have diabetes. Her brother Davis does not. So when compared to her brother Davis with a normal functioning pancreas, Ava has diabetes. Her functioning pancreas does not work the same way. So therefore she has a disability under the ADA. I mean, under the ADA that is considered to be a disability. So you really, really need to be able to register with the Disability Services Office from day one. That day one is now. Sorry about that. Dogs barking in my house. I knew that was going to happen. Register with the Disability Services Office. The important reason for doing that from the very beginning is that accommodations in college are not retroactive. So it's important for you to be able to make yourself known to the people that work in the Disability Services Office from the very beginning, even if you think that they are never going to need an accommodation. And so I'm speaking to you parent to parent right now. I'm not talking to your kids. My kids are not talking to your kids. My daughter was diagnosed when she was 3 years old, and she has a history of receiving accommodations since the day that she started her school system in kindergarten. When she was in preschool, she had accommodations as well. There will be a fight in my house. I can guarantee it when she gets ready to go to college, because she will say, I do not need accommodations. I can handle this on my own, mom. Memes, I got this. I do not need to register for accommodations. I know how to deal with my diabetes. Thank you, but no thank you. I just want to be like a normal kid whenever I go off to college. And what I will say to her is, thank you for saying that. I'm so glad that you understand how to manage your diabetes, but we are still going to register with that disability office because you don't know what diabetes is going to do. Um, every day with diabetes could be fine until there is one day that diabetes is not going to be fine. If there is a day that she walks into her classroom and her pump tubing gets caught on the door and it rips it out, and that day she is taking a timed exam, and for some reason her professor does not want to work with her on that. The professor doesn't understand diabetes. The professor doesn't understand that now she's going to need extra time to be able to go change that pump tubing out. So now she needs extended time on this exam to be able to deal with what diabetes has just dealt her. It's going to be really important for her to be able to have an accommodation. If for some reason she wakes up and she has ketones, maybe she thinks that she's in DKA and she needs to go over to the student health center to be able to explore that. She's going to need an accommodation for perhaps extra absences, to be able to address these types of diabetes related health concerns that may pop up. If she's not registered with a disability office and nobody understands that about her, that there could be diabetes related health issues that are going to come into play while she's at college, there is nothing that can be done in terms of dealing with leniency for her academics, leniency with those absences and that type of thing. So register with the disability office now if you have not already done that. That is super, super important. The other thing I think that's really important for you to be doing right now, if you have not already done that, is practicing what your 30-second elevator pitch is going to be. And that elevator pitch is something that you will alter in a variety of different environments. And that is explaining what diabetes is. And that elevator pitch is going to vary for the different environments that you're in. Your child will have an elevator speech for a roommate. They're going to have an elevator speech for an RA. They're going to have an elevator speech for one of their professors, for someone that lives down the hall, for somebody that works in the dining hall, for anybody that they happen to encounter. And what I don't need that elevator speech to be is something for somebody to be able to explain, my name is Ava. I was diagnosed with diabetes when I was 3. Let me tell you about all of the diabetes that I have had for the last 13 years of my life. These are all of the pumps that I have been on. These are the struggles that I have had. This is the insulin that I use. That is way too long to be able to explain the type of diabetes that we're talking about. It needs to be very short, very quick. What do you need the person to know about your diabetes? Why do you need them to know about this diabetes? What is the message that you're trying to convey? Very short, very quick, and then be able to move on. Because when we're thinking about taking diabetes to school with us, diabetes is not all that who we are. Diabetes is a part of who we are. So, she is a person with diabetes. She is not just diabetes. But again, practicing that 30-second elevator speech is going to be really important, because if you encounter a professor that is kind about diabetes, that is kind about somebody with a disability, that seems to understand needing an accommodation in the classroom, but then sort of changes their mind midway through the semester, it's going to be important for them to be able to pull out that elevator speech. If they need to suddenly go and speak with an academic dean later on in the semester, or they need to go to be able to, maybe they're going to interview for a job on campus later on in the semester, and they have to explain what is that thing that they're wearing on their arm. Again, they don't need to expose, a lot of information about themselves, but they need to be able to very succinctly explain what is the diabetes, what does it mean in this environment, and then be able to move on. So registering with the office, using that 30-second elevator speech is really important, and understanding that accommodations are not retroactive. So if you have other conditions aside from the diabetes, if we're thinking about things like ADHD, learning disabilities, if you have food allergies, if you have anxiety, depression, any other conditions, you need to make sure that you're also registering for those as well. A lot of the things that you're going to encounter once you get to school, especially during that move-in weekend and move-in week during orientation, there's going to be all sorts of resource fairs and tabling events. And so all of the different campus partners and offices are going to have different tables that are going to be set up. And they're going to have lots of things that they're going to hand out to you. They're going to have swag. They'll have t-shirts and cups and, keychains and all sorts of fun things that they're going to want to be able to hand out to you, where you're going to learn a lot of things about their offices. You're going to want to be able to stop by and meet with all of these different people that are there. Your kids are not going to want to stop by and talk to the important offices, but that's where you as the parent need to make sure that you check in with the offices where that they're going to need to make sure that they have services. So if you have a child that has a food allergy, make sure that you stop by and talk to the people at the dining office. If you know that they have a health condition, to where they're going to need to have, regular injections for some reason, make sure that you stop by and check in with the student health table. If they have a disability, obviously with the diabetes, make sure that you stop by and check in with the disability services office. Where they're going to want to go is to the different tables that have the loud music and the spin it to win it, where they're giving out, full-size candy bars, and they're having all of these different fun, different activities. They don't want to go over to the boring tables where they're talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act. So again, you as the parent can sort of drag them over to the more boring tables, because it's important for you to be able to introduce your child to the people that work there. We have the fun things too at our tables. We want to be able to meet you. We want to be able to hand out our swag to you, to be able to put a face with a name. So that way we can get to know your child can get to know us too. So know that that is an important part of the college orientation experience. But if you have not already registered with the office, you absolutely need to be doing that now, to make sure that you sort of have a plan in place. Again, thinking about making sure that there's not sort of one super disability over the other. You don't just have to pick diabetes. If there are other things that are involved, you need to make sure that you register for all of those. In part one of this series, we talked about, what do diabetes accommodations look like? Those accommodations that I would advise that you should be asking for in terms of academic accommodations in the classroom that I think are necessary, reasonable, and appropriate, would typically probably look like extended time on examinations. And that is not necessarily extended time on examinations that we would typically think about in terms of like learning disabilities and ADHD. But when I talked about before, when we're walking into the classroom, we have a problem with our pump. That would sort of be stopping the clock for us to be able to think about, well, now we have to be able to deal with this pump issue. We have a squealing pod of death as we walked into the classroom, and now we have to replace our pod in the classroom. That's not our fault that our diabetes device has now failed us. We have to now deal with the diabetes device and then get back into the classroom to be able to deal with that again. So when I'm explaining extended time, that's for us to be able to sort of stop the clock on the exam, deal with diabetes, and then get ourselves back in there to be able to have a level playing field to be able to compete with all of the people that don't have diabetes. So having extra time on exams, maybe testing in a different environment, minimally distracting environment, because there are times that we beep. This afternoon with my daughter who was having her birthday today, I was walking through Target with her and I could hear them turning on her PDM. Like I could hear it literally from across Target. Like I knew she was getting ready to give herself a bolus. Like I heard the sound of her people totally from across Target. I knew what was happening. So you can imagine what that would be like if we were in the middle of an exam where everybody's getting ready to take a final exam, everybody is stressed out. And so then they are activating the sound of their people on a PDM getting ready to give a bolus. That could not, that's not necessarily distracting to her because that is normal for her as a person with diabetes. But if you're somebody else in the classroom, maybe somebody that has ADHD who is easily distracted by noise and beeps and things like that, that's not fair for them. So you might want to ask for testing in a mentally distracting environment in that type of situation. Other types of academic accommodations that you might want to be able to think about would be priority seating. If you're somebody who has a tendency who might need to use the restroom, if you tend to run high a lot, or you need to, have frequent, breaks to be able to go out to get water, you might want to ask for priority seating. If your classroom has arranged seating in the classroom, you might want to be able to ask for priority seating to be able to sit close to the door. So that way you're able to sort of get in and out easily. That would be another one. There are a lot of times that people sometimes will ask for priority parking close to buildings. Sometimes there are people that, especially with freshmen, sometimes you have to park 4 billion miles away on campus. And if you do a lot of walking, sometimes that walking can cause you sometimes to be able to go low before you even sort of get on site. And so priority parking sometimes can be a reasonable accommodation for somebody that has diabetes. So that might be one that you might want to ask for as well. So these are sort of important things that you're thinking about right now before you even get to campus. But again, one of the most important things that I have said to you before that I will continue to say to you for the next 30 minutes that we're here together is that these accommodations are not retroactive. So if your child says to you, don't need to do that. I got this, mom and dad. Do not need it. I've got this on my own. I'm just going to see what happens. Let me handle this on my own. Then they handle it on their own and you meet with them. They come home and you see them, let's say at Thanksgiving, and they're like, you know what has happened? I don't have this on my own. I took my midterms. I failed all of them. I had 17 squealing pods of death. I failed those midterms. I nearly passed out when I was walking from my car to wherever. I had all of these major problems. I should have listened to you from the beginning. Do you think that you can call the school and see if we can like retake those midterms and redo some of those things that I had from the beginning? It was diabetes' fault. It wasn't my fault. That will be a terrible story for you to be able to hear as a parent, and you can call the disability office and we will say, hello, mom and dad. We are so sorry to hear this story. The first thing that we will say is, thank you for calling our office. Could you have your child call us because your child now is over the age of 18 and we need to talk to your child due to FERPA regulations. Please have your child call us. Hate to hear this story. Want to work with your child. We will love your child from this day forward. But these accommodations are not retroactive. And we cannot erase what happened with all of those squealing pods of death. We cannot erase all of that parking problem. We will be happy to work with them from this day forward, but the accommodations are not retroactive. So again, we can't erase what happened from the beginning of the school year, but we can work with them from that point forward. So dining is really important for you to be able to work with the people in dining services, meet with them, even if you do not need dining modifications. You need to sort of understand what is the story with dining. If you don't have celiac now, understand sort of what is the situation with carbs. Do they make carb counts available? Do they, how do they list the menu options? Do they have menu options available, like sort of at their buffets? Do they list the ingredients for the different foods that they have? How do they tell you what foods are available? Are there multiple dining options that are available on campus? If your child is diagnosed with celiac later during the time that they are enrolled at the college, what are the options available for students that have celiac? I think that that's one of the things that's really important. Many times, people are diagnosed with celiac or develop gluten sensitivity issues later on once they have diabetes. So it's sort of important for you to be able to know what are the options that you have. My daughter's vegetarian. She's been vegetarian since she was in first grade. That would be one of the questions that I would be asking any college, like what are the options in terms of, students who eat vegetarian? She only basically eats carbs, which is hard for people with diabetes. Where are your French fries? Where are your baked potatoes? Can she eat those? Where can I find your nachos? And like, just tell me where those are and how can I get the carb counts for those? Those would be the questions that I would be asking dining services. So sort of get to know those people. But if you have other food related issues and you would be adding in gluten issues, if you have vegan issues, if you need to eat kosher, all of those would be questions that you need to be asking all of those questions now. If you happen to have a student who is a junior, you absolutely, as you're shopping around for colleges and universities, ask all of those questions now, as you're doing your shopping for next year, because those could be decision maker or breakers as you're thinking about college making decisions in the future. Housing decisions at this point are likely made for you. So what I want to talk to you tonight is about sort of the housing 911. Here we are. You're about to go. I hope you have your bedspreads picked out. I hope you have your sheets picked out. I hope you have your your Tide Pods picked out. It is time. We are ready to go. The dog is ready for you to go right now. He has got everything packed for you and we are ready. The big question about housing at this point is going to be, what are you going to do about your glucagon? And that is what I am going to say to you. Like, that would be my worry for you as a parent. How will you handle sort of nighttime lows? That is my concern as a parent as a parent of a kid with diabetes. That is my concern for all of my young adult parent friends. How do we handle the fear that we all have about what happens at night? One of the suggestions that I have had with my other parent friends is to get the Sugar Pixel clock. And that's what my colleagues have that work with me at Children with Diabetes. It's a clock that you can plug up with your CGM. And that clock will alert to your low blood sugar, and it changes the alert tune each time you alert low. It changes that noise that it makes. And so it changes it every single time. So each time that you go low and each time that it sets off that alarm, it changes it. And so when people say, well, they have, sort of alarm fatigue and they don't hear the traditional alarms that from the CGM, this alarm on this clock is actually waking them up at night. And so that has been something that has been helpful for my coworkers that are in their 30s, young 30s. And that has really been something that has been helpful. They take it with us when we travel, when we go to different countries, when they're by themselves. That is something truly that has been helpful for all of them. So that would be my first tip for you, is to get one of those clocks. It's made by Custom Type 1. The clock would be one thing. Other people have found, putting the CGM into a glass, sometimes can make it louder. Using your 30-second elevator speech, if your child is rooming with someone, to be able to tell the roommate, at night, if you hear this alarm, this is what it means. This is what I need you to do. Our president at Children with Diabetes, his name is Jeff Hitchcock. When his daughter Marissa went to college, he came into Marissa's dorm room and he taped the old traditional red box of glucagon. He Velcroed it to her bed. And he said, the story, the urban legend lore goes, that Jeff went into Marissa's room and told the roommate, this is her glucagon. If something happens to her and she becomes unresponsive, I need you to open this up. I need you to mix this syringe and I need you to jab this in her leg. And she had it completely taped, Velcro to the bottom of her bunk bed. And that was the story of Jeff and Marissa and the glucagon when she was in college. We now have different, versions of glucagon with Gvoke and with the Baqsimi. And so I think that right now, in terms of, what are my concerns for you as you're thinking about going to college and thinking about housing concerns, it is, what is your plan for middle of the night lows? And understand that RAs are not going to glucagon your child. That is the hardest thing that I can tell you. An RA is a fellow student. What RAs are trained to do is to open up a door. They are fellow students. They are trained to open up doors when doors are locked. They are trained to call 911. They are trained to sort of monitor the halls. They are trained to plan pizza parties and to do programming events and to do tie-dye t-shirts and to do programming for residents on the halls. But they are not trained to perform life-saving measures on residents. So if your plan right now, as we are here on August the 1st, is that the RA is going to glucagon my child, we need to come up with a different plan. So, will the RA glucagon your child? Maybe they might, out of the kindness of their heart, they might. Will the roommate glucagon your child? They might, out of the kindness of your heart, they might do that. What can you do? If you are watching the numbers on the continuous glucose monitor continue to go low, 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 and you're calling and they're not responding, you need to call campus police, is what I would do. And campus police can go and do a welfare check. And they are the ones that can respond. They are the ones that can get into that residence hall room. They are the ones that will sort of go in there and will respond and do what's needed at that point. What do you say? You can say, my name is Lee Fickling. My daughter has type 1 diabetes. She lives in Belk Hall, room 101. I have continued to watch her numbers for the last 30 minutes. She is not responding to my calls or text messages. She is now at urgent low. I need you to go to her room right now. And her glucagon is taped to her bed. You could say that if you wanted to. But again, sort of if we think that sort of the RA as a student sort of supervisor on the hall is going to be our safety net, we've got to try to be able to figure out, what our other plan for that is. Okay, scary talk aside, let's move on to other fun things besides sort of what our housing plans are. Meeting with student health, if you have not done that, you likely have had to turn in paperwork to student health regarding your immunizations and other paperwork to student health. Please make sure that you have identified your child as a student with diabetes to student health. Just so that way they can be, your student can be on their radar. Not that you're necessarily trying to say that student health is going to take over their diabetes care, but just so that way they can understand that your child has diabetes, should they need anything there. Typically what we talked about and what we talked about in part 1 of this webinar was understanding what the campus mail system looks like there, especially if you're planning on mailing diabetes supplies to campus. Even though, sort of we're used to overnighting supplies to our houses, and overnight means overnight that, they're actually going to show up tomorrow to us here. If it's sort of a trucking system that comes into sort of a centralized hub on campus, and then it has to be delivered to different places around campus, that overnight service on your campus might actually take 2 or 3 days. So a lot of times whenever we're thinking about getting medication to campus and working with our student health system and working with our pharmacy services, there have been many, many parents who will opt to be able to set up a campus-based mailbox at a UPS store within the local town, because that actually is overnight, to where you can go and you can mail it overnight to a UPS box rather than sort of relying on your campus-based mailbox service. So again, working with your student health service and trying to be able to determine, is there a pharmacy on site? Can they ship things to you? Are you able to have them fill prescriptions for you? Or do you need to be able to use a local pharmacy for their prescriptions and for their DME, for their pump supplies and that type of thing? All of those things are questions that their student health services can be able to help you figure out with that. Have you worked with the fitness center? Do they have one on campus? Is there a gym that they're going to want to be able to join on within their local township or within their local town if they decide that they want to be able to work out? That's another thing that you want to be able to consider at this point if working out is something that's important for them in terms of being able to stay healthy and staying fit and active while they're there on campus too. Those are things that you can think about. A lot of times during those orientation events that I'm talking about, the Student Rec Center will be there. They're one of the fun tables that people want to go to be able to participate in their fun activities. And they'll have a lot of fun activities and fun events for them to be able to go and join in. So I would encourage you to be able to think about those fitness activities because that's a great way for them to be able to think about staying active and staying healthy while they're there as well. Another thing for you to be able to think about right now in the fall, and certainly for those of you, that are active on TikTok or your kids that are active on TikTok, we are entering the era of Bama rush season. And so we're thinking about like Greek life that is about to happen and sort of, if your kids are thinking about Greek life or participating, in extracurricular activities of the college environment, that brings on sort of a whole nother realm. It's not just academics, it's not just sort of housing that we're thinking about, but it's also sort of participating in all of the extra things of the college experience as well. And when I think about this experience of Greek life and you think about sort of, the lore and the draw of that, and you're dressing up and you're participating in this, and we're not allowed to bring bags and we're not allowed, to do all of these different things. And even, going to football games and there are clear bag rules. There are always exceptions to those. And so whenever we're thinking about having diabetes and we're thinking about having a disability, know that bringing your supplies with you are an exception to those rules. And so I think it's important to be able to think about that, when I think about, and, when I watch these stories about people participating in sorority rush and them saying, you're not allowed to bring anything with you. You can't bring your phone. You can't bring a bag. You cannot bring anything other than yourself. You do have to have access to your phone, especially whenever we're thinking about things like the new Tandem Mobi to where, your pump is operated by your phone. You may have to be able to work with, fraternity and sorority life to be able to explain to those individuals, again, 30-second elevator speech, I have diabetes, my phone operates my insulin pump, and then showing them, this is an example of my insulin pump. We joke with my colleague Ashlyn, who has diabetes. She plans our events and programs for children with diabetes, and sometimes she wears her Mobi on her arm, and we call it her attention-seeking Mobi because it's so cute and it's so small. But it is run by her phone, and whenever she wears it on her arm, we call it the attention-seeking Mobi. But if you're thinking about participating in fraternity and sorority life, and they tell you you can't bring your phone with you, you can't wear a watch, you cannot bring your phone. Well, how would you run your pump, if you cannot bring your phone with you? So you may have to use your 30-second elevator speech, to fraternity and sorority life to be able to say, I need an exception to that rule under the ADA as an accommodation to bring my phone with me to run my pump, because this is how this insulin pump is run. So as an accommodation, I'm going to need to bring my phone. I'm not bringing my phone to take pictures of all of this super secret stuff here with Sorority Rush. I'm not bringing this to take TikToks of me and my friends going through this. I am bringing this just to give myself insulin if I need to, and that is all. And that is completely reasonable under the ADA, and that would be something that would be completely reasonable as a request for you to be able to do. Same thing again with football games. Whenever you would encounter something to where they would be able to say, only clear bags and only clear bags of this size are you allowed to be able to bring. It never really, it didn't really cross my mind that my daughter would feel a certain way about a clear bag. I worked at Duke for about 15 years and we had a clear bag policy. And it completely annoyed her that we had the clear bag policy for our football and basketball games. And I was going to go work one of our games. And I said, come on, I got you this clear bag to take to the game. And she said, I'm not going to do that. And I said, why not? You know, it's just an extra pot and some juice boxes. And she said, I don't want people to see my juice boxes. They don't need to see those. And she just did not want to stand in line with her juice boxes. And I'm like, they're your medical devices. It's fine. Who cares about the juice boxes? And she just didn't want people to see that she had them in there. And she was right. Like, she didn't need people to see that she had the juice boxes in there that she was going to use for her low supplies. And so, you know, as an exception under the ADA, there should be a waiver for that. You know, you don't need people to necessarily see that you have needles and, you know, insulin in your bag. That's not anybody else's business other than yours. You know, again, you didn't ask for the diabetes. You didn't ask to bring all these juice boxes with you. So you can ask for a waiver to those clear bag policies under the ADA as a reasonable accommodation for those policies. So when you're thinking about clear bag policies for things with your extracurricular activities in the sporting events too, as we're getting ready to start out the school year, keep those in mind as well. Another thing that I'll mention here at the beginning of the school year, which you probably will not be facing right now for this fall semester, but I just want to mention it to you just so that way you'll keep it in mind, will also be for clinical environments, internships, study abroad, and study away. You normally will start off your school year and your school experience by going through your reasonable accommodation process at the beginning of your year with the Disability Services Office. And that will involve your academic environment, sort of round one, for your campus-based classes. You'll go through it, you'll submit your medical documentation, you'll sort of go through an interactive process in terms of what things look like for campus. If you anticipate having any sort of clinicals, if you are in a health science program, if you're going to have an internship, if you think that you're going to be studying away, you likely will have to go through another interactive reasonable accommodation process again. That will involve that interactive process for that other type of experience. So just keep in mind that what you had approved for that first round, for that campus-based experience, those accommodations may be altered and may be slightly different and might not necessarily be approved for those clinicals or for the internship or for that sort of out of campus, out of state, out of country experience. And so just know that that may be coming on down the road. You may not be facing that right now, but that may be something that you may be facing on down the road as you get ready to study away, study abroad, or sort of study off campus. So those are all of my tips that I have for you at this point. All of the lists that I have, all of my worries that I have for you on August the 1st, as you're getting ready to start this giant adventure ahead. I am so excited for your experience. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to you all, our guests, to see if you have any questions that I might be able to answer for you to help alleviate your concerns and your fears about what you have ahead of you in these next couple of weeks before classes get ready to start. And you can just drop those in the chat. And I'm going to put my email in here also. So if you think of things after tonight, my email is in the group chat, and I'm happy to be able to answer any questions after we get off tonight. If you think of things later on, happy to be able to follow up with you individually once this is over. So that's a great question that Andrea has about tips for students that run into a faculty member that doesn't want to uphold an accommodation or is giving the student a hard time about an accommodation. So I think in this scenario, you know, if the student has done everything right, the student has registered with the office, we have an accommodation plan in place, but the faculty member just doesn't want to uphold the accommodation, or maybe just is giving them a hard time. this can happen in a couple different scenarios. The faculty member can just be reluctant to integrate the accommodation. Sometimes the faculty member can just go away. Maybe the faculty member goes on leave and you get somebody else in there who doesn't understand the accommodation, won't agree to it. Sometimes you have faculty members who agree to it, but then they just won't implement them, because they just don't like accommodations for some reason or another. And I think the best thing that you can do in that scenario is they've got to be able to advocate for themselves. I talked briefly earlier at the beginning of this presentation about FERPA. Once your student matriculates into the college environment, the relationship that we as college, administrators and college personnel have with the student is one-on-one. And so you as a parent, even if you are paying for their experience, even if you are paying the bill for them to be able to come, we really are not able to interact with you. They can sign a FERPA release for us to be able to discuss things with you that is like transactional. So, the student can sign a FERPA release to be able to say, Ava Fickling gives Lee Fickling gives the Disability Resource Center permission to discuss this one issue with Lee Fickling, my mom, on August the 1st at 7:46. And then we can revoke it within 15 minutes, So it's very, very transactional in terms of allowing the parent to be able to have interaction with college and, college instructors, college personnel, and that type of thing. So it really is a moment where we as parents have to empower our students to be able to stand up for themselves and speak up for themselves. And so that's where the power of that 30-second speech comes up. So, the first thing that they need to do is to try to be able to speak up to the faculty member that is sort of withholding the accommodation, to go take that letter with them. Different colleges and universities are going to do this different ways. There are some colleges and universities that, once the accommodation plan is in place, they will print off, if your student is enrolled in 5 classes, they will print off 5 letters and they will say, Andrea, here are your 5 letters. These are for your 5 classes this fall. It is your responsibility to go take these to your 5 instructors. And so then Andrea then has got to go to her 5 instructors and say, my name is Andrea. I am enrolled in your class. This is a letter about my accommodations. And, that can be extremely hard, especially if you're someone that has neurodiversity, who doesn't want to talk to somebody and who has difficulty sort of giving your 30-second elevator speech. There are some universities that will say, my name is Lee Fickling. I am the director of the Disability Resource Center. There is a student named Andrea enrolled in your class. Here is her letter. These are her accommodations. Let me know if you have any questions. So the letter then is distributed from the Disability Resource Center on behalf of the student. So again, it's different ways of distributing those Disability Resource Center letters. And I will tell you that, at the places where the student is responsible for distributing those letters, half the time at final exams, those students have those 5 letters crammed in their backpacks. They never even gave them out to the professors, and we're like, what happened? Why did you not get your exam? Why did you not get your accommodations? Oh, I forgot to give my professors those letters. Students never even handed them over. So, what we need to do as parents is to encourage the student to give the letter, encourage the student to follow up with the professor if there is a problem with implementing the accommodation, follow back up with the disability office if there is a problem, because we will go after them, to be able to say, you have a legal duty to implement this accommodation. Why did you not do it? And then we can take it up the chain, if we need to. We can take it up to the dean, we can take it up to the provost level. We will do it on behalf of the student. But, we need to know that that the professor has not implemented that accommodation. Next question that has come in is what should we do to protect the supplies from the roommates and other dorm individuals? I'm mostly concerned about insulin and syringes. I also agree with that. I was also just concerned, when I was in college 4 billion years ago, like I hated my roommate eating my food. And like I hated that. I hated her using my towels. Like I hated my roommate. I hated all of it. That was like a whole nother experience. We should do a whole nother webinar just on hating roommates. I think what you've got to do is, you've just got to make it clear that these are private medical supplies. And I would put them, especially like the syringes, the pump supplies, and the insulin. I would almost get my own little mini fridge for that, for the insulin. Insulin is weird and mini fridges are weird because you don't want to freeze that. And so I would just be careful about what kind of device you're putting that in terms of, you don't want to freeze it in your room. But I think I would just be extra careful about that. Somebody has just written in that they put their low snacks in a lockbox. I think that's a great idea, because you just don't want somebody doing that. You don't want to think about somebody eating your stuff. And I agree. I think that locking it up, putting it under your bed, putting it in your dresser drawer, finding a place to be able to stash it, and especially if it's something like a prized low snack, that you don't want somebody eating. Like my friends eat gummy clusters. Like I cannot nerd gummy clusters. Like I cannot imagine just like somebody coming in and like casually eating their nerd gummy clusters. Like that to me is like the medicine, or like the 4-ounce juice boxes that we used to eat. Like if somebody drank one of those just casually, I would like die if somebody actually drank those. Yeah, and I do think that if somebody allows, and Andrew, that was a great comment, that if somebody only allows one fridge in a room, you can request an accommodation for a personal fridge. Yeah. And they make those smaller ones, the little tiny, this is crazy that I know this, but like the tiny makeup fridge. I don't know how cold they get, but we have like my daughter has the tiny ones for her cosmetics, that keep like her face creams and all of that cold. So like they make the smaller ones, and like the smaller ones that will hold like 6 cans of Coke. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like the full size mini fridge. You could get like a smaller mini fridge, that might be able to be just an insulin refrigerator that you could be able to keep in there too. So those are great questions. Any other questions?
Okay. If we don't have anything additional, I guess we can wrap up. But if you guys do come up with more questions or thoughts that you have, you can feel free to email Lee. She put her email in the chat, or to email us as well, chapters@thediabetesLink.org, and we can forward your email on to her. But yeah, thank you everyone so much for spending time with us today. We know that each student with diabetes is unique, and that your student is unique in their college journey. But we hope you got some good suggestions and you feel a little bit better about everything that is about to happen, which is very exciting. Please join me in saying thank you to Lee for her time and her wisdom today. We really appreciate it. We also want to thank our sponsors for the Off to College series. They're listed at the bottom there: Dexcom, Lilly, Novo Nordisk, Vertex. Did I miss Santa Fe? Yes, I know I missed one. And we also have a few additional resources that we want to share just from us from the Diabetes Link. You can always go back and watch this recording. It will be on our resource hub. You can also find part 1 of our accommodation series on the resource hub as well, so make sure you are caught up with that. If you are not already in our caregivers Facebook group, please feel free to join that. Lots of great advice and suggestions happening in there. And if there are any young adults on here or any young adults watching, please consider starting a chapter of the Diabetes Link at your school, or the school that you're thinking about going to. We can help you identify which colleges in your area have chapters, and if they don't, we can help you start one. So you have some on-campus peer support, people your age who also have diabetes and are going through what you're going through. Yeah, and other than that, follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, TikTok, all the things. Thank you, everyone.